another episode of Sounds Reasonable. I'm your host, Dr. Brad, and I am joined in the production of our weekly show by Tim, Tracy, and Abby. We are all members of the Free Thought community, and our Sounds Reasonable website can be found on Facebook. Do you experience frequent irrational thoughts, a pervasive belief in a divine Skynet, an insatiable urge to read horoscopes, perform spells, speak in tongues, or pray? Fortunately, you are now listening to the cure for these ailments. Sounds Reasonable. This show is dedicated to bringing you, the listener, the latest news in free thought, science, logic and reason, and politics and religion. And of course, we encourage you to share your thoughts with us after every episode by posting comments and asking questions on our Facebook page. What is free thought? What does it mean to be a free thinker? The dictionary definition is a person who forms opinions about religion based on reason, independent of tradition, authority, or established belief. Here's Christopher Hitchens' working definition. Our belief is not a belief. Our principles are not a faith. We do not rely solely upon science and reason because these are necessary rather than sufficient factors, but we distrust anything that contradicts science or outrages reason. We may differ on many things, but what we respect is free inquiry, open-mindedness, and the pursuit of ideas for their own sake. We'll now move on to our science news segment. And remember that the scientific mind is one that allows its perceptions of reality to be constrained by good evidence and good argument. Genetic diseases can be a result of a direct mutational change in the genetic information or an epigenetic change. Epigenetics refers to changes that influence the phenotype without altering the genotype. They consist of changes in the properties of a cell that are inherited but do not represent a change in genetic information. So, Tim, if I could have that figure, please. Okay, so on the left hand of this figure is shown your traditional, shall we say, genetic inheritance. So in the normal situation, gene X is able to be expressed. That is, we refer to it as being on. However, if we get a DNA sequence change that now causes the gene to be turned off, then all subsequent cells, okay, will also inherit that particular gene in the off state, shall we say. And so that gene has now become, in essence, permanently inactivated. Now on the right is shown what happens with epigenetic inheritance. So again, in the initial situation, gene Y is on. But instead of modifying the actual gene itself, we modify the surrounding molecules known as chromatin in such a way that now gene Y is off, even though the genetic sequence has not been changed. And note that the net result of this is the same. Okay, so further replication results in maintenance, okay, of the so-called epigenetic changes. Now, the major difference, however, is that these epigenetic changes are reset upon production of germ cells. And so gene Y will once again be turned back on, okay, and must await subsequent epigenetic change to be turned back off, if that's the wild type situation. Okay, thank you, Tim. Now, several genetic disorders are now associated with epigenetic changes. And Abby has a description of one of these. So Abby, what do you have for us?
Okay, so as Brad had mentioned, there are things that are epigenetic factors in turning genes on and off. A few of the ones that are normally researched are RNA as a factor, being able to basically repress certain genes, even though the production of a protein may be on, but the RNA kind of stops that from happening, or a full functioning protein from happening. Methylation of the gene could also happen, and that's the one that's probably the most studied. And that's when there's like a methyl tag on the gene that basically represses that gene from being transcribed. And then histone, which is where we have the DNA actually wrapped around these histone proteins that we call a piece of our chromatin. And so that can also cause genes to not be transcribed and then translated. So those are some common ones as far as epigenetic processes that could cause genes going on and off, or some ones that are most studied. Now, this story is from Catherine Zemmer, and it was published on February 9th, 2021, and it's about polycystic ovary syndrome and how that could be inherited epigenetically. And so, sorry, kid in the background. Polycystic ovary syndrome is a hormonal disorder that can manifest as irregular menstrual cycles, increased testosterone, and large ovaries with many cysts. And it's a leading cause of infertility in women, affecting 1 in 5 at childbearing age. But it's not completely understood why this is occurring, like the mechanisms that occur to have PCOS, or polycystic ovary syndrome. It often runs in families. Up to 70% of daughters of women with this PCOS will develop the PCOS, and then genetic variation doesn't really explain the high incidence within families. So kind of what Brad said, it's not necessarily just about the genes that are inherited, but something else seems to be going on. So scientists are starting to look at other factors that could be causing this high percentage of inherited PCOS, including these epigenetic mechanisms. So the study that this article is reviewing was in Cell Metabolism on February 3rd, and it was looking at how mice can pass down PCOS-like symptoms for at least 3 generations, likely transmitted through epigenetic modifications, and some of the mechanisms that I had previously discussed. The researchers also analyzed blood from women with PCOS, reporting that the samples exhibited epigenetic alterations similar to those in the mouse models. Margaret Urbanek, I might have said that wrong. She's a geneticist specializing in PCOS at Northwestern University. She says the paper does demonstrate a clear transgenerational epigenetic inheritance of PCOS, like the traits that are in mice. And she writes this in The Scientist. This suggests that it could also be the case in humans, but obviously does not prove it, like anything in science. And she was not involved in the original study that was published February 3rd in Cell Metabolism. In previous research, developmental neuroscientist Gio Boncini of the French International Institute of Health and Medical Research and his colleagues had identified a potential cause of PCOS, injecting pregnant mice with excess anti-Müllerian hormone, also known as AMH, and they said it would cause their young to develop PCOS symptoms, including elevated testosterone, irregular reproductive cycles, and smaller litters. They also found that AMH levels were elevated in pregnant women with PCOS compared to healthy pregnant women. And evidently we have a pathology that develops in the womb of the mother and most likely is transmitted to the fetus due to abnormal in utero environment. So this excess AMH would be that abnormal in utero environment. In this research, stop, Aubrey. Hold on, sorry. Sorry for the interruption. You're okay. Dad got her. Sorry about that, guys.
That's all right.
Real life, you know, working from home. In the new research, he and his colleagues set out to investigate if mice could pass the PCOS-like symptoms down multiple generations. To do so, they mated male and female animals whose mother had been exposed to this AMH in the womb. They mated the female offspring with the males exposed to AMH in utero, creating a third generation of mice. For this last generation, the most recent fetal AMH exposure was to their father and maternal grandparents. To Gio Boncini's surprise, when examining around 15 third generational females, we saw all reproductive defects that are typical of PCOS. They had ovulatory dysfunction, smaller than usual litters, as well as some metabolic symptoms that occur in people with PCOS, such as weight gain and features of type 2 diabetes. The team observed similar ovulation and fertility defects when they repeated the breeding protocol with healthy females from lineages that had never been exposed to AMH, suggesting that those defects were inherited from the females. So again, the last litter was not exposed to AMH, but had the same typical PCOS symptoms. So as I mentioned, methylation is one of these epigenetic factors that can control genes being on or off. And so suspecting that symptoms might be transmitted through these epigenetic mechanisms, the team took a look at the third generation females' genomes using techniques to survey the genome's methylation patterns. Methylated genes are typically repressed or turned off. The researchers revealed a scattering of genes with unusual methylation patterns, often with strikingly low levels of methylation compared to methylation profiles of control mice. The most affected gene pathways were involved in regulating reproductive and metabolic functions, including insulin signaling and inflammation. So notably, the methylation deprived genes, including TET1, which encodes 1011 translocation methylocytosine dioxygenase, an enzyme critical for methylation removal. They also conducted DNA analysis on blood samples from more than 30 women with PCOS, some of whom were the daughters of mothers with PCOS. Interestingly, they found that TET1 was among several genes that exhibited the same methylation-deprived signatures that they had observed in the mice. We really think that TET1 is one of the key genes whose alteration could be responsible for the hypomethylation that we see in both PCOS mice and women with PCOS. The team hypothesized that the initial burst of AMH in the womb, either directly or indirectly through effects on other hormones, somehow reprograms the methylation status of key genes, such as TET1, thereby influencing the expression of other genes, leading to PCOS symptoms. Further bolstering this hypothesis, the team discovered that they could reverse some of the symptoms in third generation females by injecting them with a naturally occurring methylation promoting molecule called S-adenosylmethionine. Remarkably, after 2 or 3 weeks of treatment, the epigenetic drug was able to restore both the ovulation of these animals and significantly improve their metabolic alterations. I was not expecting such a rapid recovery, Jaya Boncini said. Again, could be messing up that last name. To Elisabeth Steiner-Victorin, a reproductive physiology researcher at the Karolinska Institute, this last result is particularly intriguing, noting that the agent used in the study is relatively unspecific epigenetic modifier that affects all cells. Perhaps it could be worthwhile exploring the effect and mechanisms of more targeted agents in future studies with the eventual aim of finding treatments for PCOS. Perhaps the most intriguing finding is that they can translate this and see at least some of these epigenetic changes in the serum of women with PCOS, she says, adding that some of her previous research had also found epigenetic changes in the PCOS patients. Such discoveries could pave the way for developing potential biomarkers to predict PCOS, who this person, Sterner Victorin, has collaborated with Gio Boncini in the past, but wasn't involved in the study that this article was originally summarizing. So the role of this AMH in PCOS, finds that there's close resemblance between the AMH-induced mouse model and human patients, as well as the fact that epigenetic effects were maintained so strongly for 3 generations. It supports the idea that AMH has a direct role in the pathogenesis of PCOS rather than be a consequence of PCOS. It also raises a cautionary flag of what a significant impact hormone exposure can have on a multi-generational timescale. For humans, this means that women's hormone exposure would still be impacting her grandchildren and great-grandchildren 50 or more years later. Both Urbanek and Sterner Victorin says they're curious to know more about the underlying mechanisms, for instance, how exactly AMH causes the epigenetic changes to begin with, and whether it's directly caused by AMH or indirectly through resulting elevation of testosterone, which was elevated in the 2nd and 3rd generation offspring mice. Another puzzle is how this epigenetic pattern is maintained across generations. It is transmitted directly via the germ cells, or are elevated hormone concentrations somehow generating the epigenetic modifications in each generation? To answer the question, it would be helpful to see epigenetic analysis from germ cells specifically, rather than whole ovaries, as well as data on AMH concentrations in the 2nd and 3rd generations. Both researchers noted this. It's important to separate what is driven by germ cells and what is an in utero effect, Sterner Victorin says. Another limitation of the research, she adds, is that the team compares the methylation patterns in 2nd and 3rd generation rodents with those of 1st generation control mice. Ideally, each generation is compared with an equivalent generational control. An outstanding question, Giacobacini, hopes to answer is whether each epigenetic effects could influence male progeny as well. His study focused on female mice because by definition, PCOS affects women. But if PCOS is mediated by changes in the expression of influential epigenetic players, such as TET1, then that could affect all offspring. And some of his lab's preliminary data, already suggests. He says, so far, because clinicians rarely follow up about the health of boys born to women with PCOS, obviously, let alone track them over time, we don't know in humans whether the sons of women with PCOS might also have long-term health consequences. Okay, sorry, that was a mouthful, and I did definitely screw up some of those names. If somebody wants to correct me, I'm not, I'm not great at that.
Yeah, neither am I. But let me make sure I've got the sequence of events straight here. So PCOS is a result of hypomethylation.
Yeah, so less methylation. Yeah.
Right. So therefore, we're actually increasing the expression of the genes that would normally be suppressed, at least to some degree, correct?
That's what it sounds like. It's saying that because of this hypomethylation some genes are turned on, and I think involving these ones like TET1 that increase testosterone. So it seems like they're unsure of whether the hypomethylation itself is increasing PCOS in future generations, or if it's this increase in testosterone that's causing these PCOS symptoms.
Okay, and the reason we get the hypomethylation is because TET1 expression is being increased because it's a demethylation enzyme. Okay, all right. So I did have it straight in my head. Okay.
I guess that's kind of how I understood the article. And it is pretty interesting to see how hormones, whether like in utero or, could hormones that you're exposed to even before pregnancy, could that influence or have any epigenetic factors that would influence on and off of genes of your children?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Right. One of the more interesting examples of epigenetic inheritance that I'm aware of was the role of famine. There's a rather famous case study, I believe, is in Sweden, where they had a crop failure, and I forget the disease or syndrome that they were following. But anyway, they could directly identify it as a result of this famine that caused epigenetic changes for several generations down the road. So it's clear that all kinds of environmental factors can affect the epigenome, shall we say.
And it's really interesting that they were able to reverse some of that effect too. And of course, that's very promising if they're able to.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to bring up. So thanks for jogging my memory on that, Tim. But S-adenosylmethionine, or SAM, is a known methyl donor molecule. So increasing the concentration of that artificially, you would expect an increased methylation events. But I would be very reluctant to use that as a potential treatment because it's not specific. There's no specificity to using that particular molecule.
Yeah, I agree. And the articles did state that that could increase methylation and then decrease the symptoms. But like you said, there's no specificity. So it's hard to say what other things it's turning off. And that, could have adverse effects on other genes. So.
Yeah.
Right. That's I was thinking the same thing, is that if you, what other things are you methylating that might be disruptive?
Exactly.
Of course, the really interesting study with the Kelly twins, right? And the epigenetic changes.
Going to space.
Yeah, and after being in space, one in space for 25 months, I think it was, or
right.
Yeah, it was around 2 years.
Yeah. And how some of those things I think reverted or came back. Some changes didn't, I guess.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the role of our environment in expressing our genes, because I think for so long, we have thought, genes, that's the key. Like, if we know what gene they have, if we know, if they have a mutation in their gene, then, we're going to be able to have specific medicines, and we're going to be able to change those genes. And it's just, like anything, when you're studying something in biology, that you get one step in and then you're like, this is a lot more complicated than we originally thought. And then there's all these other things that are extremely interesting, but also make it way more difficult to to treat some of these things for real people.
Yeah, just the thought that, well, what you inherited, that's what you inherit is what it is, and it's not going to change or doesn't change. And of course, now we know changes. Changes a lot.
Yep. Yeah, it can.
It sure does. Well, Abby, thanks so very much for that story. And
Yes,
we'll
thank you,
be
Abby. I
right
learned a
back.
lot.
Oh, sorry, Tracy, you have a comment?
I was just gonna say thank you, and I learned a lot.
Oh,
Oh,
good.
okay, fantastic. So we'll be right back after this short break with More Sounds Reasonable.
All alive. The devil's in the detail, lingered inside. Oh, a holy crime. But how can I hide you without an alibi? It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence. I can't wait no longer. I'm playing with the monsters. Everything that brought me alive. Though we're all like monsters, playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence without an alibi.
And we're back with More Sounds Reasonable on March 21st. And by the way, happy spring equinox, everybody.
Yes, yes, it is.
Hey, yeah,
We're balancing some
reason for
eggs.
the season.
Yep. That's right. So that 23 and 25 degree tilt. Remember that. Well, guess what? Religious beliefs have consequences.
What? What?
I've never heard that before.
The anti-vaxxer movement is one of the most troubling culture war issues.
Mhm.
Not only endangers the lives of its followers, it also threatens the lives of those around them. The story I'm going to relay today was published in SciPost on March 8, 2021, and is entitled, "Study Suggests the Modern Anti-Vaccine Movement is Shaped by Christian Nationalist Ideology." And this article was authored by Beth Elwood. New findings suggest that the contemporary anti-vaccine movement, also known as the anti-vax movement, is characterized by religious exclusivism. The study found that Christian nationalism was the second best predictor of anti-vaccine attitudes among Americans. The findings were published in Socius, Sociological Research for a Dynamic World. In the United States, one of the steadiest predictors of vaccine attitudes is race, with the Black population being far more skeptical toward vaccines compared to the white population. And of course, there's really good historical reasons for this, but unfortunately, we don't have time to get into those today, but maybe we'll get onto that subject at a later time. But study authors Andrew L. Whitehead and Samuel L. Perry say that the influence of race may be trailing off when it comes to the modern day anti-vaccine movement. Conservatism, libertarianism, and anti-science attitudes characterize the movement, and the researchers propose that at the heart of these beliefs is one prevailing ideology: Christian nationalism. Now, Whitehead and Perry say that the endorsement of Christian nationalist ideology is not exclusive to those who practice religion and is being adopted by people who oppose both scientists and the mainstream media's representations of health and disease. The current coronavirus pandemic is marked by a virus that depends on the high uptake of vaccinations to achieve herd immunity. Within this context, the researchers note that exploring the predictors of anti-vaccine ideology is crucial. The researchers analyzed data from 1,219 respondents of the 2019 wave of the Chapman University Survey of American Fears, or CSAF. The CSAF is a national survey that addresses a range of fears and concerns among the American public and measures seven different beliefs about vaccinations. The vaccine-related items included kids today are given too many vaccines, and boy, I've heard that one before. I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely heard that one before.
Sure.
And the benefits of vaccines are greater than the risks. The survey also included measures of Christian nationalism. An analysis of the data revealed that Christian nationalism, conservatism, being older, and being Black or Hispanic compared to white were each associated with anti-vaccine attitudes. In contrast, greater income, higher education, and identifying as a Democrat versus a Republican were associated with greater support of vaccines. Among all predictors of vaccine distrust, again, the strongest was race, with Black Americans showing a greater opposition to vaccines compared to white Americans. The researchers say this is unsurprising given the history of medical abuse endured by the Black community and persisting today. While this finding was expected, the authors note that it is nevertheless important as it highlights the continuing influence of race when it comes to attitudes toward vaccines. The second strongest predictor was Christian nationalism. Even after controlling for a host of socio-demographic, religious, and political characteristics. Whitehead and Perry say this falls in line with previous findings, showing that Christian nationalists are more likely to reject science, feeling that it threatens traditionalism and moral order. They are also more likely to hold libertarian populist attitudes that involve a distrust of the mainstream media's coverage of infectious diseases. Finally, Christian nationalism has been affiliated with Donald Trump, who not only fiercely defends the influence of Christianity, but has shared anti-vax rhetoric to millions on Twitter. Now, I'm going to just interject this quickly, but did any of you see that Trump, through, I don't know, maybe the use of a cattle prod, actually got on TV and said, pleaded with his followers to go ahead and get the vaccine? That was within the past week, I think.
Yes.
Pretty recent.
What about the cattle prod though?
Oh, in my mind, that's about what it would take to get him to reverse a position he held previously. But
I didn't hear about that. That's
Okay.
pretty interesting.
Yeah.
yeah. So
He
go ahead,
did go on TV and say, get the vaccine.
yeah, but I mean, it's a classic example of crying wolf. Because a number of his followers said that wasn't really him talking on TV. So they don't believe it now because he's been so anti-vax.
It's my Q dogs.
But,
It's my Q dogs.
yeah, so I wonder if they believe that because he did get the vaccine, so I wonder if they even believe that.
Well, see, therein lies the initial screw up.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to digress too far till we get to discussion,
Yeah.
but that was the initial screw up. If he just would have been, open about receiving the vaccine, we wouldn't be facing these issues right now. So anyway, so given that the study's data was collected before the coronavirus pandemic, it did not include a measure of support for a COVID-19 vaccine. Still, the authors cautioned their findings point to the potential difficulty in achieving widespread vaccination. A previous 2020 study led by Perry found evidence that Christian nationalism was linked to a reluctance to follow COVID-19 public health measures, and the authors speculate this trend likely extends to anti-vaccine attitudes. And of course, we've seen that too. What were the first organizations to say we're not going to follow this? We're going to do what we want, but various churches around the nation. As we demonstrate,
Okay, get out.
Americans who embrace Christian nationalism are much more likely to question the efficacy and safety of vaccines, to believe that doctors and drug companies are dishonest about vaccine risk, and to believe that it should be up to individuals to choose whether to vaccinate or not, Whitehead and Perry report. The implications of these findings are clear. Even with the existence of COVID-19 vaccine in the future, a substantial subset of Americans will likely view it with suspicion and resist receiving it. So, I'll open her up for discussion. So what do you think?
I think-
Fortunately,
Okay.
I'm
Go
just
ahead,
saying,
Tim.
fortunately, that's where government can step in and have these mandates. And now, even though schools, there's certain vaccination students have to have, we still have a form that they can opt out. They can sign, which I obviously don't fill, but they should have that option. If they don't want to vaccinate their kid, then they can take their kid to a different school. But I guess as a public institution, we have to educate them. But again, we I guess we don't do enough to try to counter the anti-vax movement.
Okay, so if most of us get the vaccine and a lot of people don't, what risk is that to us? I mean, yeah, that's my question.
Right. So
Good question.
So if we have, in essence, a bunch of laboratory flasks that are mobile running around out there, what we run the risk of is generating variants that are going to escape the vaccine. And then we're all the way back to having to develop a new vaccine and start this process all over again. So that's the main risk to not having reached herd immunity.
It's like not finishing your antibiotics, like you don't finish your antibiotics and then some of those bacteria are left to
Right.
make you sick and then be transferred to other people.
Yeah, that's what they tell us.
Yeah. And,
All those doctors and scientists
What do
don't
they
know
know?
anything. Why would we listen to them?
The
We
concern-
all have leftover antibiotics in our medicine cabinet. Everybody, all of us have leftover antibiotics.
I don't take drugs. The concern then is, of course,
So
you
I'm
get.
hoping
I don't believe in
I was hoping you would
antibiotics.
say that.
I just eat
I don't even
penicillin. I just
believe in
eat mold and get the
If you-
natural source.
Right.
I just
I
think-
eat
Yeah,
whole
just take
bread.
it direct.
I just have my Aunt Bonnie send me herbs.
There you go.
I
So,
get herbs from China, so I feel like I'm pretty safe.
the concern, of course, is that you get enough people not vaccinated, and then you have those pockets of people that come down with the measles or whatever, and then like Dr. Brad was saying, you really increase the risk of producing those variants.
Oh.
Just
See,
letting
I was really hoping you would just say like that we would all be fine because we were vaccinated, and then they would be the ones at risk, and then probably they would eventually just wither away eventually, and then
Natural
we
selection.
wouldn't have to worry about.
Of course,
dumb
initially
people
that'll
anymore.
be true. that they will be the ones that will be the targets of the virus. But
You know,
unfortunately, again, they can generate new variants that can then escape the vaccine. That's what we have to really try to avoid.
And of course, the pandemic, COVID is a prime example of illustrating when you let things run wild and all the number of variants. I mean, the the only variants that they talk about are those that have some effect to the spike protein, but there's a ton of variants that have been produced with other mutations in other areas.
that sucks. How are we going to make people take it?
Well, my idea, and hopefully the travel industry will do this. Basically make it impossible for people who haven't been vaccinated to travel on airlines. Insist.
There are a lot of people who don't travel. I was like 40 before I got on an airplane.
Right, but I mean that's to me
I'm
that's
poor.
the place to start, and then you
Poor
move
people
into
don't fly.
amusement parks.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so amusement parks will refuse entry unless you can provide your vaccine card. So
Theaters.
fully vaccinated. I mean that to me is where it has to come from, because there will be way too much resistance for government to
We
impose
should
itself.
not allow them into. We should not allow them into the Dollar General.
I
Well,
think,
sporting events would be even better.
yeah.
Sporting events
Oh,
is
yeah.
another example. So I mean, there's plenty of places that you can put up barriers, to people that
Concert.
have not gotten vaccinated.
I think there's a serious issue right now, though, with our current culture and not trusting. And so, a lot of people, when they hear, oh, they're going to force us to get the vaccine, to do this or to do that, it for some reason solidifies their belief that, like, the government and scientists and researchers are like out to get them and are doing this for some weird conspiracy reason. And so
Microchips.
yeah, I mean, that's just like, it's so dumb. Like, it doesn't even make sense, but yet, like, there's so many people that actually believe those things, and then it just travels through, and you have all these people that are like refusing the vaccine, and it's, I mean, people say that like just the most ridiculous things, and the only thing I say is like, that's not how vaccines work. You just like scream it at the top of your lungs. That's not how it works.
You're just a moron.
I have a friend who said something to me like that the other day, and I'll work on him. I'll be like, why don't you want to get the vaccine? I'm gonna figure it out. I'll report to you later. I'm gonna watch. You know what? I'm gonna make him watch this. Not make him, but
Gunpoint.
you guys notice I'm bossy.
No.
You can say it out loud.
Hey, I'm all for it.
You're really far away right now.
If you can boss someone into getting the vaccine, I think that's good. I think that's a positive use of your talents.
I mean, I've learned it from other things, but if I could turn it into good.
There you go.
There you go. That's all it takes. All right, so stay with us. We'll take another short break and be right back with more Sounds Reasonable.
Messing with my head again. You had your heart set on me, but these feels, they come and go, and they come so easily. do I love the touch but never love the feeling? Why do I, baby, why do I love the way you always leave me? Why do I, baby, why do I love the touch but never love the feeling?
Well, we need Tracy to come back there.
Some of us are back. Some are back.
I don't know how. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Yes,
can hear you. We can't see you.
Oh, back to meeting.
there you go.
Yeah.
Can you see me now?
You just see your
Yeah.
geckos.
Aren't they
There you
cute?
are. Okay. Well, during the
We
Trump
used to
years,
raise them and breed them, and they're so cute.
during the Trump years,
I'd get
I always,
another one, but I gotta miss it once a day, and it's just too much responsibility.
Oop,
Oh,
okay, you're
okay.
back.
I'm back again.
Okay. So during the Trump years, I always thought that building a wall was a great idea. Unfortunately, the wall I thought should be built was being torn down, and the wall that should have been torn down was being put up. A recent article in The Humanist, authored by Rob Boston on January 19th of this year, addresses this issue. Tracy has the story. So Tracy, is the wall of church-state separation going to be rebuilt under the Biden administration?
All right. This is from The Humanist, dated January 19th. Church and state. The church and state wall is battered after 4 years of Trump. Let the repair work begin.
Tracy, we lost your video again.
Oh.
Is she on her phone?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if she can
She what?
do both. If she's on her phone.
Hmm?
I'm not sure if you can do video
Um,
and read from your phone if you're on your phone.
I'm gonna try it. I think I've done it before.
Oh, okay.
Can I? Wait. I'm gonna try it. You can't see me?
No, not at the moment.
See the geckos.
Can you see me?
Not
Geckos.
yet.
You can see me. You can see me now.
No?
I can't read it then.
We'll watch the
Because
geckos.
Yeah, go-
I don't
go
have
ahead, go ahead and
internet.
Go ahead and relay the story, Tracy. Go ahead.
You can, with my geckos.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
All right. Despite Donald Trump's attempts to orchestrate a coup, Joe Biden is the new president of the United States. It's disturbing, however, that Trump was able to generate so much chaos on his way out the door, and equally troubling that most Senate Republicans didn't bother to denounce his effort to subvert democracy. Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris now oversee a country racked with partisan division, a nation where hundreds of thousands have died due to coronavirus, a country whose economy is faltering as we experience a period of more lockdowns and stay-at-home orders. It's also a nation that, like the rest of the world, is reeling from effects of global climate change. Biden and Harris have their hands full because there's much damage to repair. It's hard to know the intended sequence of their actions. But those of us who have a special interest in questions of church state relations and religious freedoms hope to see a sharp reversal of Trump policies. Shortly after the election was called for Biden, Americans United for Separation of Church and State released a 10-point agenda to restore and protect religious freedom, which Biden will hopefully adopt. Indeed, he early on vowed to enact one of the planks by repealing Trump's noxious Muslim ban. That's a good start, but there are several other actions Biden should take early on to begin the difficult task of rebuilding the church state wall. Here are 5 of them. Anchor the nation's response to the coronavirus in science, not wishful thinking, prayer, or conspiracy theories. Trump was prone to disregard the advice of actual scientists in favor of a litany of quacks with questionable ideas. Religious right organizations, which egged Trump on by filing lawsuits arguing that churches should be able to stay open despite bans on mass gatherings, made the situations worse. It's time for real leadership and science-based response to the pandemic, and Biden is in a position to provide one. Number 2, stop impeding Americans' access to birth control. The Affordable Care Act mandates that no cost birth control be made available to American workers in their health care plans. There are exceptions for religious organizations, but in the past few years, some secular employers have demanded the right to exclude contraceptive coverage as well. Trump's Justice Department sided with them. It's remarkable that we're even having this discussion in the year 2021. The use of safe and effective birth control isn't just ubiquitous, it's in the public's interest. Biden should reverse course and order the Justice Department to side with American workers seeking access to contraceptive, not bosses who don't want to provide it. Number 3, put the focus back on the public schools. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos spent 4 years scheming to divert as much taxpayer money as possible away from public schools into the coffers of private, mostly religious schools. She did this even though public schools served 90% of the nation's children. The Biden-Harris administration must end all support for voucher plans and get the funding focus back where it belongs, our secular system of public schools that welcome everyone. Number 4, end government support for religious-based discrimination. Increasingly, some owners of secular businesses are demanding the right to refuse service to anyone they consider morally deficient. Members of the LGBTQ community, non-believers, Muslims, single mothers, non-Christians, and so on. This is nothing more than an attempt to reestablish discrimination by cloaking it in the guise of religious freedom. In an affront to our nation's civil rights laws, Trump used the resources of the federal government to boost these forms of discrimination. Biden should change direction and make it clear that discrimination in the secular settings, and certainly in government settings, will not be tolerated. Number 5, respect and celebrate the true pluralism of America of America. Although Trump was never known as a man of great personal piety, he won support from Christian nationalist groups and formed an evangelical advisory board stacked with extremists who had great influence over his administration. To appease them, Trump enacted several reckless and hurtful policies, many of which targeted the rights of members of the LGBTQ community. The ban on transgender troops in the military, which leaders of the armed forces opposed, is just one example. Right-wing evangelicals are out of step with Americans' views on social policy. Biden should send the message that he values true religious diversity, including the right to believe or not as the individual sees fit, and endorse a theory of religious freedom that grants no one the right to use their faith as a cudgel to harm others or take away their rights. I'm sure I said that word wrong. The good news is that Biden can do many of these things through executive orders or regulatory changes at the federal level. That's how Trump enacted most of his policies. Biden can undo some of them with pen strokes and others by rewriting regulations. Obviously, there are many other church-state issues Biden will have to deal with. Consider our federal courts, which are often the final arbiter of church-state controversies. Trump has stacked the federal judiciary with far-right jurists. It may take years to repair that damage. As we emerge from this period of darkness, we should take heart in the fact that the work of repairing our nation, as slow and laborious as it is likely to be, is now underway. 4 more years of Trump might have left us with a scale of destruction so massive there would have been nothing left to fix. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so the birth control issue is probably one of my favorite ones to discuss along these lines, because it is absolutely asinine. To me, you cannot be pro-life and anti-birth control, period. Because what is the reason for the vast majority of abortions? Well, it's an unwanted pregnancy. And how do you prevent unwanted pregnancies? Use birth control. Okay, this abstinence-only nonsense is just that, absolute nonsense. When people are given the proper instruction, okay, they will use birth control. That's been proven in third world countries around the world. Women, much prefer not to have 10 kids running around.
Understandably.
And let's be clear, it's not because we hate babies.
Exactly.
Right.
Like babies. Babies are fine.
I love babies. I just don't want to have to take care of them all the time. Like one or two is like enough. You don't want, one after the other, after the other, after the other. I mean, I don't anyway. And I think that that's perfectly acceptable to not want that. And, have the choice. Like, I think that's what's the most important thing, is that women are in control of their own bodies. And if they choose to have children, then they can make that choice. And if they don't want to have children, they can also make that choice.
Well, and it's interesting, who's the biggest group that cries and whines about I should be able to do what I want. You shouldn't be able to make me do this or make me do that. It's the group that wants to make women do what they want, right?
Right.
Not give them the choice.
I mean, if Congress wanted to step up and take all these babies home with them,
No, you send them to those that wanted you not to have birth control. You just say, well, here you go. I'm giving you some of my
Yeah.
babies.
I just don't understand why that's a political issue. I guess that's what frustrates me is like, why is the government saying you can't use birth control or you can't get an abortion or, whatever? Like, to me, like, that's not the role of government, is to ban abortions. Like, that's not their role. I think that should be a decision between women and healthcare providers. And contraception, the same thing. Like, that should be a decision between the woman and the I shouldn't say healthcare provider, because some healthcare providers have like their own personal feelings that they implement. So those who, just want the best for society, and instead like of inserting their religious beliefs mainly all over everyone else. Like, that's
Yeah, have
something
you ever
happened
heard?
in Arkansas. Something happened in Arkansas the other day that was really bad. We lost some important rights. I can't remember exactly what they were. I just remember that it was bad. Anybody remember or happen to notice what happened in Arkansas?
Was that part of the abortion situation? I know that, I can't remember what state it was in, but they basically banned abortions.
Yeah. I think
Louisiana's
that's
been
what
very
happened.
and Mississippi, I think, is down to one location in the entire state where you can get one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
It was
And also we would have less women seeking abortion if we had contraception, like like that's you can't say no abortions, and no birth control. Like, you can't do that. I think that birth control should be free and able to be easily provided to any woman who wants it. And I feel like an abortion should be a woman's choice, and they shouldn't be berated if they try, to get one. Like, the whole story about women doing it and the third trimester and all this, that's all bullshit. Nobody, there's nobody doing that.
It's
And
just
they
like,
blow it up.
it's just like the pictures they carry around. Those are not aborted fetuses that were done through a legal abortion.
No.
Are you talking about like that van?
Yeah.
Remember we did the van?
All those pictures were not from a legally aborted fetus.
Or like they have like little babies, like little fetus, like made, and then they like, this is what they're aborting, and it like looks like a little, no, they're not. They're aborting a little ball of cells. That's what they're doing. The blastula. Get it, come on.
Yep.
It doesn't have a mouth. It doesn't have a fucking mouth. It doesn't have,
It has a hole
anus.
sometimes.
Yes.
If it has a blastopore, it has an anus.
Yeah, exactly. Because our anus is formed first,
That's right. Yeah. We all start out as assholes, and some of us continue to be one when we get older. Some of us don't change.
Yeah, it's either a blastula or a gastrula, and that's it. Like, it's a little ball of undifferentiated cells. Like, come on. We can't hate women for doing something about that. Like, no.
No.
Back to your original question though, Abby. So why is this a political issue? The reason is because of the base of the Republican Party. Okay, so who is the base? It's the evangelicals. That is the base of the Republican Party. Now, I equate a great number of evangelicals with the old Puritans, because the Puritans were constantly worried that somewhere, some way, somehow, someone was having fun. And that really is what it comes down to, because they absolutely believe that the only reason for sexual intercourse is reproduction. And any other route, anything else, okay, does not belong. And that's obviously the hardcore center of their base, but nevertheless they rule the day. So that's why.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate.
And Tracy, at the end of their story, that you talked about how the changes that have occurred long lasting. It kind of reminds me of when we went from the Middle Ages, when you went from the learned society of enlightenment, and then all at once you had this regression, and here come the Middle Ages, and you have all this loss of knowledge and reasoning, and
I have a question. I'm rereading The Handmaid's Tale, and I've seen the whole series like twice. Is it possible for a man to ejaculate and it not feel good?
well, not for me personally, but
yeah, I suppose if there's like a hot burning poker up there, that might not feel good.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
If a hot burning poker up there, or you're trying to pass a kidney stone at the same time, then it might not feel good.
Yeah, I suppose a kidney stone could do it.
Could you ejaculate while you're passing a kidney stone?
I don't think you would. That's a different pipe.
One tube gets shut off where the other tube gets open.
I was not expecting that. I almost lost my coffee.
Just answer the question.
As far as I
think it's a no, Tracy.
Not that I know of.
No.
That would be a no.
I guess I can keep practicing to see.
We're gonna be censored on YouTube.
Okay.
Well, if I want censors for that one, I guess I'll take it.
Yeah.
Well, when we at Dr. Brad's party, when we do this live, we may actually be censored.
Well, one last quick thing on this, then we'll have to move on. The discrimination based on religious views. Have any of you ever experienced it? Because I have. I'm just wondering if any of you have.
Oh yeah.
I've been discriminated against what now?
For shall we say non-religious views, for having non-religious views.
I once had someone, well, not once, probably more than once, but tell me that I need Jesus in my life. So I feel like that's kind of it was derogatory.
Right, but I've actually been denied a service right here in Kearney because after all, I'm known as the infidel of Kearney. So
They did what to you?
I went to I won't mention any names, but I went to a particular landscaping company, and they said, "Oh yeah, we'll be right out to evaluate your lawn and see what we can do." They never came, so I went a second time, and they said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry. We somehow missed the appointment, or some lame excuse." And they said, "Well, we'll be there at this time." And well, didn't show again. So after that, I figured it out, that this guy was a member of a particular church, and I kind of tracked him down a little bit, and then I figured it out. But anyway, obviously I can't prove that was the reason, and so that's what they count on, that you can't really prove why they didn't show up or do a particular thing. But anyway, it's happened to me. I was just curious if any of you had similar experiences.
Not.
I'm pretty sure the job I got when I got fired from the newspaper in April 2 years ago, here in Searcy. Searcy is very, very white, Christian, and conservative.
Yeah.
And I covered all the governmental meetings, and they have an invocation before each meeting, and I sit for the invocation. I don't stand
Right.
while they do it. And so I mean it was very well known that I was an atheist, and I'm pretty sure that was a big part of me getting fired from that job. Otherwise, well, the official reason was that I was too erratic. That was just my
Erratic.
ADHD.
Radical atheist. An erratic radical.
I was erratic. I was a damn good reporter. Always on time with my stories. Always like finding people working for the city, stealing money. I was digging all that stuff up. I was a really good
Maybe that's
reporter,
why.
really good reporter, but
Mm.
my boss just didn't like it how I would work at like 5 stories at a time. I'd be like doing this and this and this and this and this, and he just couldn't keep up with me, even though I was doing a good job and turning everything in.
Hmm.
But he figured out a reason and let me go.
I guess, to be honest, I kind of don't divulge that information about myself, because I know that people, especially like where we live, people tend to have very ignorant views of non-belief. And so I just don't talk about it. And I have had, like, as a biology teacher, I've had people ask, and if you do ask me straightforward, I will, be honest, but I just choose not to. And, because I'm a little worried that people will be judgmental towards me. So
Yeah, I fully get it. Fully understand it, Abby. All right, we'll take our last break and we'll be back with our crazy story of the week.
Well, can I say one more thing?
Go ahead, quickly. Yeah.
Okay, the people at the governmental meetings started to respect me kind of for it. Like if something really bad happened, we would have a moment of silence so that I could participate. And they were cool about it, like the judges and the mayors and stuff, because we had a rapport. But
That's cool.
Yeah, that is.
but yeah, I think my boss didn't really like that.
All right, go ahead, Tim.
I'm feeling so hollow. Don't you know? Don't you know? I'm living in shadow. Don't you know? Don't you know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? You were fool's gold. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Oh, there, lost my cursor. There we go.
There we go. And we're back with our crazy story of the week. Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be a constant source of crazy stories. I have.
Again? That lady?
Yeah, that lady.
Mhm.
One of her more interesting claims was that the forest fires in California were being caused by Jewish space lasers.
But what?
by, by Jewish space lasers.
Space lasers.
Oh.
Okay, I got you. I'm following.
Tim has our crazy story of the week. So, Tim, I imagine the Smokey the Bear commercials are going to have to be changed if MTG is
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Because,
Yes.
it won't, because only us can't prevent forest
Yeah,
fires
no.
now.
No, it's only Jews start forest fires. That's how the new slogan is.
Only the Jewish
Only the Jews.
bears.
Yes, of course.
The Jewish
This is a
bear.
follow-up. This is a follow-up, Tracy. This is a follow-up for our earlier discussion of these comments, and this comes to us from it was posted on Yahoo Life, and it was written by Aaron Colbert, excuse me, and posted on the Friday, March 19th. It's titled Marjorie Taylor Greene excuses her, quote, Jewish space laser comment in a very Marjorie Taylor Greene way. So since taking office earlier this year, Georgia Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who just so happens to be a QAnon conspiracy theorist, among other things, has been exposed for making a number of egregious racist and transphobic remarks. Greene's old Facebook posts have shown her glorifying violence against Democratic politicians, supporting anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, and displaying disturbing thoughts about school shootings. In one post on which a New York Magazine reported earlier this year, Greene suggested that in 2018, the California wildfires were started by space lasers controlled by the Rothschild banking firm. Instead of something, well, maybe more probable, like, I don't know, climate change or cigarette smokers or whatever, the claim is rooted in a long history of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about the Rothschilds family. After New York Magazine writer Jonathan Chatt described Greene's theory about what he called, quote, Jewish space lasers, it didn't take long for the term to start trending on Twitter. Now, Greene is walking back these comments. She's not taking responsibility for them. Instead, she's blaming the far right's favorite boogeyman, the radical left. Quote, this is a story some leftist journalist, really he's an activist, wrote a hit piece on me and titled it Jewish Space Lasers, Greene told Newsmax TV. Quote, you know, the left-wing media, they just run the same lies over and over again, and they call me an anti-Semite and say that I said that something like Jewish space lasers, and I never did, unquote. Greene told Ami, I think it's pronounced Ami magazine, which caters to Orthodox Jewish community, that she didn't know the Rothschilds were Jewish until recently. It might just as well been non-Jewish people who started the wildfires with space lasers, according to the Congresswoman.
Or aliens.
Yeah, yes.
Say that again. Say the funny thing again. I drifted off.
It could have. She said that it could have been non-Jewish people who started the wildfires with space lasers, and then she adds this quote: "It really hurts to be called an anti-Semite or a racist. No one has ever called me that before in my life until the left-wing media decided to attack me." Despite her attempts to appear otherwise, Greene is no less of an extremist than she was when she took office. Last week, Greene voted against the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, to explain her vote, she made a transphobic argument on Twitter, writing that the bill would be a violation of, quote, girls and women's rights by destroying God's creation, male and female. Her office claimed to CNBC on last Friday morning, that Twitter suspended her account as a result of that. Too bad. Meanwhile, House Democrats moved to expel her from Congress for advocating violence against our peers, the Speaker of our government and the Speaker of our government, said California Democrat Jimmy Gomez, who introduced the resolution last Friday. In February, the U.S. House voted to remove her from committee assignments over the statements supporting conspiracy theories and advocating violence against other members of Congress. I kind of looked into, so is this a possibility? So that was the question. The question remains, can Greene actually be removed from her congressional seat? And again, it said in a short, yes. Expulsion is the harshest form of disciplinary action that can be taken against a representative, and but it requires 2/3 majority vote from the legislative body seeking removal. Now, then it also read that according to House records, expulsion quote, serves principally to protect the reputation of the institution and to preserve the dignity of its proceedings. But the House is also careful to respect the people's vote and has never expelled a lawmaker for their conduct prior to taking office. The House has only used the expulsion powers 5 times over the last 200 years. The last time was in 2002 when Democrat Jimmy Terfkent was removed from office after he was convicted of bribery, racketeering, and tax evasion. So that's about all I can stand of her. So, well, again, like Dr. Brad said, she is going to be, until we get her out of that office, a constant crazy story of the week, probably. So what do you guys think?
Well, I don't see how she's ruled out aliens. Yeah, do you?
Right, I don't know.
I honestly,
think
like,
she's right.
I just don't see it happening. I just, like, with the amount of like conservatives that we have that are like too afraid to go against even the craziest BS, like, I just don't see her being removed anytime soon, which is complete, like, I don't know how it happens, but this is the world we're currently living in.
Yeah, because you think, if you look at that definition for expulsion, that she has got to be the poster child for fitting that definition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just did some quick math in my head. I think it would require 290 House votes to remove her. So that would be about 673 Republicans would have to go along with it to get her removed. I like Abby said, I don't see that happening. So.
Yeah. But I guess at least bringing it up, I mean that would be a big thing. Getting out open, get it to a vote, and let's let the Democrats, or let the Republicans show their hand again. Show
right, yeah,
where their loyalties are.
Yeah.
Surely there's a group serious about getting her out of there.
Oh yeah, I read the one other article I read that was talking about the expulsion thing. Said, yeah, there are numerous groups that are calling for this and contacting representatives about getting her out of there, and that's why he made that proposal. Because yeah, there are definitely groups.
I mean, I think that it is important that even if it's not successful, that they try, because we just can't be like, oh, like let this kind of behavior go and just be like, oh yeah, I mean, this is just another day in American politics. Like, it can't go on like this. I feel there were so many times that during Trump's time in office that I just thought, how can this be happening? How can people be believing this or letting this happen? Like, it just seems so surreal. And then it's continuing with lots of other politicians. And it's like, the more ridiculous you are, the more people are willing to believe you. And I'm so tired of it. And I think that regardless of whether it's successful enough or not, we need to speak up about it, speak out about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Abby.
Yeah.
All right, Tim. Well, thanks so much for our crazy story. That will wrap us up for this week. If you have enjoyed our program, please pass the word to your friends and associates, believers and non-believers alike. Again, just a reminder that you are welcome to post questions and comments on our Facebook page. Remember, there is a big difference between having good reasons for what one accepts to be true and having bad ones. Incidentally, this is the only distinction one needs to become a strict atheist. This has been Dr. Brad for Tracy, Tim, and Abby saying so long.
Bye.